Welcome. You're listening to 360 Info. I'm your host, Antonio. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate power. And to manipulate power is to manipulate possibilities. What's going on? We got the sun shining. Ra is shining today, y'all. And we're going to suck it all up in September 2nd. Hey, see, September. You know what comes after September 2nd? September 3rd, and that's your boy's birthday. Yay! I usually don't trip too much on birthdays, y'all, but I just decided to throw that out there, y'all. But yes, we have a great day for you and a great show for you and a great weekend we got with all this. Ross decided to bless us with all that energy. So y'all go out and get some of that energy in the air. Take some good deep breaths. Go out and hug a tree. We used to clown that when people say that. Go hug a tree, but it really is some medicinal energies and properties in hugging the tree. That's a spiritual relationship between you and the tree. You know, it gives off oxygen for you to live. So life is in the tree. So let's think on those terms as being more sacred and more connected to Mother Nature. Don't let these people over here take you out of your element. In remote, we got brother Vincent is out and about as well as I am. What's going on, Vince?
Well, Brother Lynn, I am in Dallas, Texas. I have had the honor of participating in a wedding, and so I'm going to do part two today. But pleased to be here and pleased to see all of you online with us, and of course, listening on the radio. We have one of our probably greatest guests. He's a recurring guest here on 360 Info Network. And I just want to lay a background for you. A few weeks ago, probably about a month ago, there was a wellness summit that occurred at South Point Hospital. And as you know, we've been talking about that. And I want to continue the momentum of this event because one of the most important things in life is our ability to experience optimal health. When we look around and we see folks and they're struggling to walk, they're struggling to breathe, they're struggling to exist. Many of the reasons that they are experiencing those things is because of things that we consume. So it is important for us to be mindful of the things that we put in our bodies. I have said for many months that the things that you take in will either hurt you or help you. So we want to talk about some of the things that you can do to improve the quality of your health so that you don't have to struggle with your health. And to do that, we have one of our foremost experts on health. He is Dr. James Brown. Of course, he's no stranger to you. I just confessed to him a few moments ago. He does a Facebook Live with one of our friends, Sandra Bishop, on Thursdays. And I look forward to 11 o'clock on Thursday morning for the conversations that they have. They are so enlightening, and I am amazed time after time after time at the great wealth of wisdom and knowledge that he has about the human body, not just the physical, but the spiritual and the mental as well. So, as we continue this conversation, I'd like to invite Dr. Brown to once again share his wisdom with us. So, Dr. Brown, when we were having conversation about some of the things that came out of that conference, and of course the conversations that you had with Sandra and others, I'm assuming there were some really important things shared, and one of them was the idea of living on a plant-based diet. So we can talk about all the things that are out there that cause damage to your health, but I think it's really important for folks to know what they can do of a positive nature. We know all about how sugar affects us and how the bad oils affect us and so forth and so on. But we also have this relationship with protein that has been engineered by the folks who sell us food, by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and others who give us things to consume because there's a profit involved. So let's talk about why it is important to think about a plant-based diet. What are the benefits that come from consuming plants as opposed to consuming an overabundance of protein through animals?
In that health and wellness summit that you referenced a couple of weeks ago, one of the presenters is an author, a physician, and his name is Dr. Campbell. And I would recommend everybody listening and watching if you would pick up his book. It's called The China Study, and it is a really wonderfully written and researched book looking at the relationship between wellness, health, disease, and plant based versus animal based diet, and just a wealth of studies, but mainly that the people who have the lowest risk, who have the longest longevity on the planet, these are people who ingest a plant based diet. Those who have the largest disease burdens, those who have the shortest longevity, are those who have a meat based diet. There are these areas in the world called blue zones. There are five of them: one in Okinawa, Japan, another one in Sardinia, Italy, one in Greece, one in Costa Rica, and one in Loma Linda, California, here in the United States, where the average age of death is past the age of 100. And all of them are basically plant based diets. Those that do eat some meat, they eat 4 ounces of meat, which is about the size of a deck of playing cards, 5 times a month. Other than that, it usually is a bean or lentil based diet. That's how they get their protein. One of the interesting things in Dr. Campbell's book, The China Study, is looking at the relationship between diet and cancer. We know about the relationship between diet and heart disease and stroke and those things that are the most common killers of people, not just in America, but in the Western world. So we're talking about uh, Northern Europe, Eastern and Western Europe. It's heart disease, but also the relationship between cancer. A lot of cancers are initiated by viruses and changes in cell structure. But one of the things that happens is that those who have these um, changes in the genes, they only go to cancer most times based upon an animal based diet, animal protein. So Dr. Campbell has coined the term is that cancer is the gun, but it's the diet that pulls the trigger.
Okay. So we have this issue with animal protein, and I know, as I was saying earlier, it's because we have too much animal protein. But I'm also mindful of something that a biochemist by the name of Brother Yaki mentioned, and I think it was also mentioned in the summit that type 2 diabetes is affected by animal protein, and that it's said that if you have a plant-based diet that relies primarily on fruit with vegetables, you can navigate that a lot more successfully because of the impact that animal protein has on the system. You can consume fruits that are too high in sugar and it affects the blood sugar levels. But if you eliminate animal protein, then you can effectively use those fruits. Can you comment on that a bit?
Sure. So the animal protein actually affects the pancreas in such a way. So type 2 diabetes is a modern disease, unlike type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease. Type 2 diabetes is caused mainly by being overweight, by having by having a high BMI, a body mass index, carrying too much weight for the frame that you are. And this weight is not lean weight, it's not muscle, it's not bone, it is fat. And so the way that the protein interacts with the pancreas's ability to produce insulin. What happens in type 2 diabetes is you don't produce the insulin in the right quantity and at the right time to keep the blood sugar low. So you regulate it with artificial means. An easy way to in prediabetes before this gets out of hand is simply to get down to ideal weight. However, if you have a diet which is high in animal protein, it affects the pancreas's ability to help regulate that insulin release, making it timely and sufficient, such that you can, if you don't have the animal protein, you can eat things like watermelon. For most people with type 2 diabetes, we would recommend them not to do it because it raises the blood sugar. But however, if you're not having the animal protein effect on the pancreas, you could still have something like that and still not raise your blood sugar to alarming levels over long periods of time. And again, it's the interaction of the animal protein with the cells that are regulating a lot of the processes in the body that alters our physiology. So it's not just the sugar or the salt that we're consuming that gives us heart disease, that gives us high blood pressure, that gives us a dementia, but it's also the effect that the animal protein have on cells that are regulating the processes that can work to counteract those effects.
I'm glad you brought up dementia because I heard recently that they're looking at actually a type 3 diabetes. And the type 3 diabetes might just actually be a dementia. It's been stated in some circles that one of the reasons that people experience dementia is because of many medications that they might be on. Can you talk about perhaps some of the ways that we can stave off dementia? There are some things in terms of lifestyle and diet that can be beneficial to perhaps pushing that back.
Sure. So when we're speaking about dementia, what we're talking about is a loss of cognitive ability because of the destruction of a significant amount of brain cells. So some of the common things that do that, uh, tobacco smoking, alcohol, and sugar. And so it is especially in the type 3 diabetes, it just means that the effects of the sugar, which produces inflammation throughout the body, produces inflammation in and among the brain cells, forming little small plaques, such that the brain cells are inflamed and eventually die. And so when that happens, then your ability to process information, the ability to retain your memory, the ability to um, synthesize, absorb, and learn things is grossly hampered. And so reducing the amount of sugar and also the one of the effects of animal protein is it also produces inflammatory substances that also leads to autoimmune diseases, but also the diseases of inflammation such as a dementia. So reducing sugar, reducing the animal protein reduces the inflammation overall in the body, and that helps to reduce and reverse a lot of the inflammatory processes in the heart, in the brain, in the kidneys, in the joints.
Okay, so it's safe to say that perhaps you might want to consider eliminating some of the meat that we're eating. You talked about, folks having a piece of meat the size of a deck of cards, but only doing that maybe 4 or 5 times a month, or restricting their intake of those kinds of things. You've also mentioned the importance of moving. So if you can reduce your body weight through physical exercise combined with a plant-based diet, you can experience a better quality of health. Brother Hamtoni, I want to bring you into the conversation and just ask you if you have anything that you want to talk to Dr. Brown about this morning.
Yeah, one thing, Doc, I just want to comment too on that dementia. your thoughts on this. I think I might have ran across some information about um, I guess one of the issues with dementia could come from, like you said, that protein, and people may need to understand that, you having pathways to the brain, and from you know, uh, blood sources to the brain. So by you eating the protein, by clogging up the arteries, it can cause an issue in the brain that can stop certain parts of the brain from functioning and cause dementia. Is that, I think most people always just look at it as, other issues that may cause dementia and things like that, but they don't really think about the blood vessels and the blockages that can occur in the brain.
If you do CAT scans, which is one of the imaging studies that we do to diagnose a dementia or to look for brain disease, you'll see. So normally the brain will show up as a dark structure. And so sometimes you'll see little white, small little pinpoint dots throughout that dark tissue, and they're called microvascular infarcts. What they mean is that there are um, deaths of brain tissue because of blockage of the small arteries in the brain. These are actually commonly found in people with diabetes and with high blood pressure, so that overall they may not, people around them and the people themselves may not actually notice something going on, because these infarctions or this death of brain tissue is small and gradual and happens over time. So you may not even notice that you're having these small strokes at the age of 50 or 60. But after having so many of them, by the time you're in your 70s, now that's when we have the issues with memory, with forgetfulness, with I can't find my keys. Where did I leave my glasses? What's this person's name? Oh, I know that name. It's on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't bring it up. Those are the kinds of things that happen, from your point of view, from the blockage in the arteries. Now, there's the major arteries, like the carotids, where the large strokes come from. That's when people come in and they, their arm doesn't work and their speech is slurred and they're drooling, or their leg doesn't work, and so they end up with a paralysis. They will also have cognitive decline too, because the part of the brain that controls the motor is also closely associated to the memory areas, and so they will have forgetfulness, or they may actually not be as smart after the stroke as they were before. So they may have to do the speech therapy to regain their ability to speak. They may have to have occupational therapy to regain their motor function. But we have a tendency to think that as we get older, that the Western world has normalized bad health, and they simply call it aging. But so much of the aging that happens is because of the lifestyle choices, which gives us an accelerated damaging effect over a period of time. But it's become normal in the Western world, and in other parts of the world these things are not normal. So one of the ways I test men is, if if your blood circulation to your regenerative parts is good, then usually the effect in your brain is good, because we call that the canary in the coal mine. So a man's ability to maintain good erections is a good show of his blood supply. And if it's been damaged by medications, tobacco, alcohol, high cholesterol, high sugary diets, then if that's an issue, I tell them then the same thing is going on in your heart and in your brain. And so, what's one of the most popular drugs now? It's Viagra and Cialis. but they're treating that part of themselves, increasing the blood supply there, but they're not doing anything to reverse the bad effects of the diet and the things that they're doing for the blood vessels in their heart and in their brain.
Yeah, that's an issue that we really have to take. And it seems like, on the show we constantly try to reiterate the body chemistry, the body makeup, and showing that a plant-based diet is better for you just by based on your physiology, and and I think this whole Western system had just taken. I mean, some of the videos I watched said due to around the 1900s how they really came full steam, pushing meat down our throat as the major source of protein. But if some of us just step back and took a look at things, you would see that, you know ingesting a live food is going to be better for you than something that is dead or semi-dead. It's just that simple. And then I think you hit it on the head, Doc, when we talk about complacency, because recently I've just been saying that we need to, as a society, need to be screaming bloody murder, or just whoever that's in charge of the food and the substances they put in the food, because dementia's running crazy, prostate is running crazy, cancer is running crazy. We seeing it all in our communities, but it don't seem like our we lulled to sleep with it, and not demanding some answers about like what's going on. This thing is going further. We getting so used to those things and expecting those particular ailments, and we're not, holding anybody accountable for this.
You raise a real good point. You remember when they used to, I don't know if it was true or not, but they would talk about how do they maintain order among incarcerated men. And so they would put ingredients in the food that would induce them to be less aggressive and less assertive, and cut down on the fights and homicides in incarceration. Well, the same thing that is causing disease in terms of the diet that the Western world ingests, the same thing causes complacency. You can't
Uh,
change. I'm sorry, you cannot separate the mental decline, the ambition, the assertiveness, the advocacy from the physical decline, from the physical infirmity. So you want a population of people that's vitalized, that's active, that wants to take ownership over their health and ownership over the government that is responsible for creating this Frankenstein food industry, but they're depleted by their natural chi, they're depleted by the emotional excesses that we indulge, and we're depleted by the lack of vitality in the food. You pointed to it. If you eat food that is alive, it helps to keep you alive because you're eating things that have vital energy. If you're eating food that is dead, if you're eating dead animals, don't expect to be vitalized and enlivened and enlightened by something that is dead that you're ingesting.
Doc, I want to return to part of what you were explaining about dementia and ask you about the possibility of restoring brain cells. We grow up with this idea that we've had this alcohol, or we've had these kinds of things that destroy brain cells, and we ascribe to the notion that once they're gone, they won't come back. Are you aware of any things, any modalities, any procedures that might be able to assist us in restoring brain activity and brain cells that have been destroyed by the lifestyle that we've engaged in error?
Absolutely. So to your point, so the first thing is as you mentioned, change the choices of what you're putting into your body. Put in foundational foods that will give you the molecules to help to repair. I mean, one of the things that that has been thoroughly documented over time is the increase of brain size in people who meditate on a regular basis. Also, the relative lack of dementia in those populations of people who meditate on a regular basis. If you do MRI scans, magnetic resonance imaging, or CT scans, computed tomography, and look at the brain size of people who meditate on a regular basis versus people who don't, the brain size is larger. You actually grow new neurons. You don't make the ones that are already there larger. You make more new neurons with constantly going and breathing a certain kind of way and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system and giving yourself new thoughts, new images to contemplate in that space of being utterly relaxed, that it actually forces new growth of nerve tissue in all sections of the brain. So by stop putting in the bad things and by putting in the good foods, taking some supplements, especially ones with fatty acids, taking good omega 3s, taking some choline, taking some lecithin, making sure that you're having food which can help produce new neurotransmitters. So, taking foods with serotonin, taking foods with dopamine, and making sure that your gut, which is the largest producer of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter, that your gut is healthy. By gut, I mean small intestine. So now we're talking about the gut biome and we're talking about probiotics and the intestinal gut flora. So making sure that you're having the right nutrients in there and then putting those nutrients to work by constantly going into that relaxed state. And that helps to control the emotions because when we become emotional, we also produce stress hormones, and those hormones have an inflammatory effect on brain tissue. So people who have mental health issues, who are, have general anxiety disorder, people who have bipolar, where they have these lows and these highs, they're producing these stress chemicals, which over time will further damage their brains. So with the meditation, with the supplements, with the diet, overall, yes, we can heal our brains.
That is extremely powerful. And I hope folks who are listening and watching took that in. The idea that meditation can increase your brain size, can help restore your brain. That's a reason to start making it a regular practice, perhaps. We give so much of our time to devices. We'll sit and binge watch for hours on end, shows that take us somewhere else, take us outside of ourselves as opposed to taking us within ourselves. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. I'd like to add to it that we also have microwave radiation interfering with our brain activity. Can you perhaps comment on the ways that that affects us and perhaps causes us to have brain fog and our mental functioning isn't as good as it could be?
Certainly, one of the causes of dementia or cognitive decline over time is poor sleep, not getting enough sleep at night. And when you investigate why a lot of people don't sleep well at night, is because we are focusing our attention on electronic devices and then try to turn off that device and go straight to sleep. Whereas the electromagnetic waves from that device stimulate certain brain activities and it revs up the brain wave pattern. Also, talking on cell phones. So, most of the time when I'm talking on the cell phone, I don't put that thing up to my head. because if you do thermal imaging of people's heads after they've had the cell phone up for a half hour, the side of the head that has had the cell phone on it for 30 minutes is about 45% hotter and irradiated than the other side of the head. So I would encourage people use your speaker. If you have to have a private conversation, put it on speaker and go someplace else. Also, the cell phone towers that we're around, the high frequency voltage things, the 4 and 5G towers, our internet devices. All of these things are emitting electromagnetic radiation, and it has a deleterious effect on the brain, but also on our electromagnetic body. Yes, we are made up of this physical body, but that is just the part of the body that you can see. There are several other bodies that we possess. This is a whole different conversation, but the next body that we have is an electromagnetic body. And so some of the diseases that we have are actually um, a- accelerated, accentuated, and amplified by the disruption of our electromagnetic body by the electromagnetic devices all around us. So, as Lynn was talking earlier, he said, go hug a tree. Yeah, leave your cell phone in your car. Go walk in some area where there's grass and trees and sunshine and try to detox from the electromagnetic energy that's all around you. One of the nice things about the area that we live in, Cleveland has a wonderful Metro Parks area. You can go places, you can rent a canoe, you can go hiking, walking trails all over this area and detox from that electromagnetic energy that is constantly coming to our brains and to our bodies and to our electromagnetic vehicles and causing disharmony, causing disruption. And once that energy is disrupted, then it starts to set in into cellular and tissue damage.
Okay.
That's what I was going to. Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. That's taking us right back to the whole meditation piece. You know what I mean? By by going out there and grounding and getting into nature, you could I guess, defuse or counteract some of that negative 5K energy that we're absorbing from everything around us. That's pretty much what you're saying, Doc. With the meditation piece coupled with going outside in nature and try to connect with Earth, I believe that would help us as well. That's pretty
A
much what
lot
you're
of our bad eating patterns
saying.
is because of emotional issues that people have. So people stress eat. And so some of the foods, especially carbohydrates, they produce serotonin in the body, and that is gives us a feeling of contentedness. And so a lot of times, if you're anxious, tense, upset, that's what you will reach for. And so, part of the meditation piece, part of being able to be in touch with and control and not be controlled by your emotions, is the meditation piece, such that you can make better food choices. You don't feel pushed or pulled to eat what we call comfort food, or to eat the food that well intentioned when we were young and maybe our parents didn't know better, and people want to call this our cultural tradition. No, a lot of the food that we grew up with that comes from our past is related to the choices that we were limited to when we had a certain kind of being in this country. But those choices aren't the best. And so when we get anxious or tense, though, it is part of our childhood. And so we reach for those things. And so part of being healthy is being able to deprogram yourself from those habits which are not healthy and reprogram ourselves with better habits, better choices, better eating styles.
Hey, my last question. I'm gonna leave you guys after this. I just thought about something and it just something just came across my phone, made me think about where we at right now in our community with a lot of hostility, a lot of violence and things going on. I ran across some information that talked about the record industry producing music with the 440 hertz versus the 432 hertz and things like that. And is it true, or could you speak on, Doc? And is that a reality? That these particular frequencies, or have this government been practicing, the manipulation of these particular frequencies to control behavior?
I I can't speak to the veracity of that particular way, whether or not. I do know that in the 1940s, and Vince, as a musician, I think better knows this, that I think it was the A note or some other note that it was changed in the musical scale from one frequency to another. But what I can speak to with some expertise is the relationship between certain sound vibrations, certain sound frequencies, and its effect on human physiology. In fact, there is I think DARPA is the acronym for Defense Advanced Research Project. But we know that there is a section of the Department of Defense that looks to conceive of and manufacture very high tech weapons. And so there is a weapon that they use, a sound wave frequency, which allows them to manipulate behavior in people. If if people can remember back to one of the stages of the second Iraq war, when Saddam Hussein was talking about, we're going to have the mother of all wars, and he had this huge tank fleet. And when America confronted the tank fleet, what happened was, instead of a huge battle, all of these people in the tanks on the Iraqi side got out of their tanks and put their hands up and surrendered. That was because of the use of a sound wave frequency that they used, that they were able to manipulate that behavior. They also use that in certain instances in riot and crowd control in certain
Yes.
areas. So,
Mhm.
yes, we know for sure that there are frequencies that can control behavior. It's the same thing when you're doing drumming, and certain rhythms can induce certain behaviors in people. So we know the effect of sound and vibrations and frequency on thought patterns and behavior patterns. We know that this very well to be true.
Yes. Well,
Uh,
I will embellish by bringing up the film that we've talked about a few times on this broadcast, and that is They Clone Tyrone. There were scenes in the film where there was a DJ that was playing music and it caused people to spin around in circles. And it was the evidence of at least the concept of using frequencies, using sound to affect behavior. So when we think about that, it's very well possible that they are doing that and they're actually showing us. In terms of the recording industry, as Brother Hamtonio had mentioned, there was a manipulation of frequencies going from 440 hertz to 432. They are very intentional about the way they use frequencies. But on the other hand, frequencies can be used to heal the body. In our program last week, we interviewed Dr. Trinace Talbert, and she mentioned, and Brother Hamtonio also mentioned, Dr. Royal Rife, who was very proficient at utilizing these frequencies. As a matter of fact, we talk about the history of the American Medical Association and the changes that took place, and how we took look at allopathic medicine and how it's a modality of treatment rather than cure. So it's not really in their interest for people to be well if they want to make money. So I just thought I would iterate that, because we have to be aware of everything around us. And that's why, as Brother Hamtonio said, hug a tree. I was thinking as you were describing that dynamic, how it kind of exists as a countermeasure against the other kinds of activity, the cosmic activity. So when you step into that forest, the force field that's in that forest is one that can benefit you. And as someone said, leave the cell phone in the car, because then you don't have that radiation affecting you in that moment. And it's such a simple thing for us to take that bike ride or that walk or drive to the park and spend that time in communion with nature. But I'm mindful in this moment also, and I think you mentioned it in one of your conversations with Sandra, about the idea of what we relate to as being God is nature. And
Yeah,
that's why it's so important to make that connection.
absolutely.
We can, so in a number of spiritual cultures, which are different from the westernized version of Christianity. Let's not forget that actually Christianity, is based upon teachings that come out of Africa. But in the westernized version of Christianity, Adam is given dominion over the earth. And they interpret that as I have control and do what I choose to on the earth. It's mine to use. In other concepts of this cosmology, there is actually only one matter energy throughout this entire universe and one consciousness. It transforms itself into the variety of things of life that we see, trees and animals and minerals and birds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And our ability to understand that we are a part of its being and its being is a part of us, and that nature, the English word, actually comes from neter or neteru, which is the Kemetic word for God. And so nature and God are the same thing. It is all of this that we can see, taste, touch, and smell is its existence outside of us and inside of us that we are one with. So when you're actually breathing the air, breathing the oxygen that the leaves and the grass are emitting, and we're emitting carbon dioxide that they inhale, and you recognize and become one with this rhythm of giving and taking from the natural world. You become one with it, and actually you heal yourself and you help to heal the planet by recognizing, acknowledging I am one with all.
Well said. Now, and I'll talk to you guys. Well said. Well said. You life giving forth life. One of the African brothers pretty much said that he was just showing you that the earth is a living entity. You can't give life from something that is dead. So if plants, flowers, trees, and everything else comes from the earth, that means the earth is alive, passing on life sustaining energy to the plant. And the plant has life, and it has life sustaining essence of God that is given to you. So the African brother said, we acknowledge that all being a part of nature, which is all a part of God. God's essence is in everything. We say that over here in this Christian way of thinking as far as religion is concerned, but we really not internalizing what it's actually saying. So our African brothers and sisters and people of indigenous nature, they understood that. That's why they revered nature so close to God, or actually being God, and personalizing those particular entities and calling them names and things like that, in order for the people to understand it. All of it is God. Nature is God. Just that simple. Right on, brothers. And I get back with you guys.
All right. Thank you,
All right,
brother.
my brother.
I think that's a perfect segue into talking about what he just brought up, and that is the I can't even get that word out.
Anthropomorphic.
Thank
Yes, I
you.
do. Yes, I do.
Um, Talking about the different aspects of what we relate to as a creator, but also just being mindful of the fact of the replacement of our conception of God. You know, we look at the picture or the artwork that was produced by a European, and we look at that as the model of what God is, and then we have conversations about what God is, and we continuously talk about He, but we don't include the feminine aspect of God in that conversation. How important is it for us to realize that it is not a he, but it is perhaps a them?
Well, the reality is this entity that for the we'll use the term God, it has always had a dual aspect. It's two parts of a whole. And so there is an old truism, as it is above, so it is below. Meaning that if you study what life looks like in the aspect that you know about it, you can discern and deduce certain understandings of what it's like in the unseen world. So in our world, in order for life to come forth, there has to be a feminine and there has to be a masculine, and they're two parts of a whole. So if this is how life here is sustained and proliferates, how must it be in the unseen world? So you cannot have, so in our world, regardless of what this hidden agenda is in terms of the alphabet people, he's, hims, men do not produce life. They actually inject life into the female who has to gestate it, nurture it, and deliver it. And it's the same in the unseen world. So this entity that we call God, the creator, Allah, Yahweh, Nebuchadnezzar, is a dual entity of masculine and feminine. And in terms of our own beings, every man has testosterone, which gives him his masculine attributes, muscles, beard, certain kind of voice, certain kind of assertiveness. And women have a high amount of estrogen, which gives them breast, the ability to have a womb that produces life, that makes them nurturing. But also, women have testosterone and men have estrogen. There's a dual aspect inside of us. So you see this male female duality in every aspect of life on earth. And therefore, it must be that way in the higher spheres too. So, yes, this entity has a male and female aspect. And up until maybe about 6,000 years ago, the aspect of God on this planet that was really worshiped, or, and by that I mean cultivated and respected and looked up to, was feminine. All over the world, and in these ancient sites, you dig up all of these aspects of the goddess. It wasn't until the world became dominated by the Western mind that this supreme being became a he, a him, and a father.
Interesting. You know, when you talk about the estrogen and the testosterone, I think that there are some causational factors in our diet that result in a hormonal imbalance. So, you know, we're bombarded with estrogen as men. And I think one of the reasons that I've heard that there is this predominance of estrogen is that testosterone not only affects the muscles and the things that you talk about that relate to gender, so to speak, but it also affects us mentally as men, so that
That's
we
right.
are not as inclined to stand up to authority or
That's right.
to contest the things that are happening in us. So I think that speaks to the importance of us, again, knowing what kinds of things that we can do to increase our testosterone, knowing the kinds of things that we can stop doing that affect our testosterone in a negative way. But also on the flip side, in the past, we've talked about atrazine and the studies that were done by Dr. Tyrone Hayes, where he showed how male frogs were affected to a point where they actually started to have an ability to reproduce without the female. But as you pointed out, there cannot be people on earth if you don't have men and women doing what men and women do. As we wind down, I just wanted to share a few things with the audience that will perhaps help them. We've suggested meditation as one, and I'm taking notes, brother, because I meditate, but not often enough. So now I really have a motivation to increase my meditation. I think it's something that some of our elders could probably take advantage of too,
Yes.
because they're in that stage of life where their brain activity is diminishing. What kinds of things can you suggest to people who are having difficulty falling asleep? And I know you mentioned turning off the electronic devices and whatnot, but also I was thinking about perhaps meditation before you go to bed. But I know that sometimes when you meditate, you actually fall asleep. So it might be counterproductive to a certain extent. But can you suggest things that folks can do if they want to enhance the quality of their sleep?
Sure. I would suggest that people Google something called sleep hygiene. And so there are several factors involved in this. One of the things also that was noted in the blue zones around the world where people have a average longevity of 100 years is that they eat their smallest meal in the evening. So if you eat a lot um, right around sundown or after sundown, you're forcing the body to digest food. And that process actually is activating other processes in the body. So, one of the things in terms of trying to get a good night's sleep is don't try to sleep with a full stomach. So, you want to, try to have your evening meal as early as your schedule will allow you, and try not to overeat and try not to snack before bedtime. We talked about not running your electronic devices all the way up until the time that you're going to intend to close your eyes. So you want to have a wind down period, at least 60 to 90 minutes before you go to bed. You also want to not have any light on in the bedroom, because it is melatonin that helps us to fall asleep. The melatonin is produced by the pineal gland, and that gland starts to secrete the melatonin as the sun goes down and less light is going through the eyes. If you keep putting light through your eyes, it shuts down the melatonin. So you want to start getting into a dim and a darkened room about at least an hour and a half before you're going to try to go to sleep, so you can take advantage of the production of melatonin. So if you want to play some soothing music, if you want to read a couple chapters from a spiritual book, or as you indicated, actually just in the evening before bedtime, just sit down in a straight back chair, close your eyes, learn to breathe from your abdomen. Proper breathing is not in the chest as so many of us do. You have to learn to breathe from the abdomen. The abdomen goes out on the in breath and in on the out breath, such that you're putting pressure on the vagus nerve in the abdomen, and that slows down the brain wave pattern in the brain. So the slower the brain wave pattern, then the more drowsy you become. You in a darkened room, the melatonin kicks in and it starts to induce that sleep state. Don't have a full stomach such that you're not trying to digest food, and do something that's comforting and soothing. So some nice soft music, or some reading something in a spiritual manifest, a book, a pamphlet, or something to put your brain waves into a state of relaxation.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for that sage advice, and I'll be transparent. You know, sometimes I stay up a little bit later than I need to. That's something that I'm going to work on. Perhaps another thing to set intention about during the winter solstice. You've given us a lot of food for thought, tongue in cheek, perhaps, but it's reality. And I want to thank you for joining us today. I also would like to acknowledge Medusa Sunshine and Jamie Moon, who have been watching us on Facebook and YouTube. Those of you who are listening right now, you will have access to this recording by going to my YouTube channel, and it'll be 360 Info Network with Dr. James Brown. So if you didn't get it all, if you didn't take notes, you can go back and review the tape and get some wisdom and understanding. This has been magnificent, my brother. I know that you are sitting in your car and your foot is probably close to the accelerator. You're headed up to Detroit to take in some of that wonderful music that you can listen to as you are, you know, in your winding down stage so that you
Yeah.
get optimal sleep. So again, I want to thank you so much for joining us on 360 Info Network, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Vince, it's always a pleasure. I really appreciate you giving me the platform, and thank you so much for all the work that you do. And enjoy that ritual that you're going to take part of this afternoon. And
Right.
remember me there.
Okay. And I'll see you in Detroit tomorrow, my brother.
All right, my brother.
All
Peace.
right. As always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. And I want to thank Tone Harley because he came to our rescue today, my brother. Thank you so much for doing what you do. And also, always thank you for listening. That's it. We'll see you next week. Peace, blessings, and prosperity to you all.